Blaze News investigative journalist Steve Baker will join us to explain his day in court for January 6th charges. The list of possible Trump cabinet members continues to grow, and Trump's policy objectives could send him on a collision course with D.C. bureaucrats. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Tuesday, November 12th. Well, earlier today, Blaze News investigative journalist Steve Baker spoke with reporters after pleading guilty in his January 6th case. Here's what he had to say.
I made the decision specifically to avoid the shaming exercise of a trial. I've watched enough of these trials, as you know, from the media room and in the courtrooms to know that that's exactly what these are.
So here to break it all down is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief for Blaze News, and Steve Baker himself. So, Steve, take us through your decision to plead guilty here today.
My decision was very easy. After my sentencing hearing last Wednesday, which was, of course, the day after President Trump was confirmed to have won the election, I went through what I consider a brutal hearing in which the Justice Department, not only them, but also the court itself, showed their inflexibility, and they showed to me that they were going to not allow us to present my case as that I've imagined in my mind for 3 years now that I would ultimately present my case if I was charged. And then after being charged back in March of this year, I've had 10 months now to build that case, working with my attorneys. The court denied us on every single motion that we made in order to put forward the case that we wanted to present, which was a case of selective prosecution, a violation of the First Amendment in terms of my behavior that day. I behaved completely, 100% professionally as a journalist. That was what I did on January 6th, as did 80 to 100 other journalists. The fact that the court denied us the right to present that case, I told my attorneys in a Zoom call that we made immediately after my hearing last Wednesday that I was not going to do this. I was not going to allow the government to put me through nothing more than a shaming exercise, and to be quite frankly, a 100% losing record for January 6th defendants. In Judge Christopher Cooper's courtroom, there has not been a single exoneration, not a single acquittal. So I was going up against that buzzsaw if I did go to trial today. So I instructed my attorneys to inform the court and inform the Department of Justice that I would be pleading guilty to all 4 charges today and denying them that opportunity. And that's what we did.
So to be clear, I mean, justice denied. I mean, here they said you could not claim. They didn't care about the selective prosecution. They don't care about the fact that they haven't gone after hardly any other journalists. And then also, could you say something about the way these trials go forth? Because I don't think people understand the extent to which people aren't allowed to defend themselves within them.
Well, Matt, I can give you example after example, beginning with the Oath Keepers trial, which, of course, was the biggest, most publicized January 6th trial of all back in the fall of 2022. And I was there every day for 9 weeks. I saw how those defendants were denied the right to present evidence that was exculpatory evidence in their own trial. And yet the government was allowed to present basically anything that they wished. Though the government chief prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Nestler, pointed across the room at the Oath Keepers in his opening statement. I was sitting in the courtroom with him. He pointed at them and said, these people were the tip of the spear. These people led the insurrection. These were the leaders of the violence, except that the Oath Keepers weren't even on the property when the violence began, when the first barricades and the first doors were breached. They were leading their security details over to the approved licensed stages that were set up on the Capitol property at the time. And then you go from the Oath Keepers down to the case of, for instance, Stephen Horn, a young independent journalist who had been acquiring press badges for the journalism that he had done since he was 16 years old. Now, fast forward at 22 years old, facing the federal government denied him the right to present to the jury proof that he had been a journalist since he was 16 years old. They were not even allowed to show the entire dossier that he had collected and put together of his journalism since he was a kid. And they denied him that right, and they found him guilty on the same 4 basic misdemeanors that I pled guilty to today.
By the way, we should tell our audience, I saw what he told you today on X, that his probation officer wouldn't allow him to go cover your issue today. He couldn't go to DC to do that. He's still suffering under this. Never mind the fact, of course, that no one has actually been convicted of insurrection. But let's leave that aside. You have something to tell us about what happened in the courtroom. We spoke about this earlier today. It's very disturbing. Explain what this judge did and said today.
Well, I actually, Judge Chris Cooper committed an unforced error today. I think he made a big mistake. One of the things that happens is that when a sentencing hearing is set, and they did set mine for March 6th, he asked the clerk there in the court, what will my sentencing hearing date be? She said March 6th at 10 a.m. Then he said, and he proceeded to go forward and said, now, because I'm not likely to see you in March, which, by the way, that was a clear indication that he's expecting these pardons to come down. He admitted twice in his soliloquy that he was probably not going to see me again in March or in his courtroom. And based on the fact that he probably wasn't going to see me, he was going to go ahead and deliver the same admonishments against this defendant that he would in every other a sentencing hearing related to January 6th or any other trial, non-January 6th related at all. So what he ended up doing is he ended up spending the next 5 or 10 minutes admonishing me for my speech. He never criticized my behavior. He admitted that I don't know you that well, obviously, because we didn't present my case in trial. He doesn't know all about me, but he certainly has been reviewing my journalism, because the first thing that he did is he regurgitated what the FBI had said about me in one of my television interviews that I did on the evening of the 6th with WUSA 9 here in D.C., and he regurgitated one of those accusations completely out of context, and then he went on for the remainder of his time to criticize my journalism. He actually criticized me criticizing the quote-unquote weaponized Department of Justice. Then he criticized my criticisms of the bias of the D.C. courts and jury. These are things that I've been writing about for 2 or 3 years now. We have a judge, a federal district court judge on record now criticizing a journalist for his criticism of the government. I think he blew it, and we now have it all on the record.
Yeah, Steve, that is an unbelievable story, but somehow yet here we are. You're talking about Donald Trump and promising to pardon the January 6th defendants. You said this year you are a single issue voter, and this is exactly it. So what do you think the likelihood is that that will follow through and get done?
Well, I'm more confident today than I ever have been because of Christopher Cooper. Judge Cooper's twice making the remarks that I'm not likely to see you in March means that they're even talking about it around their own judges' roundtable, water cooler, or whatever they do there at the D.C. District Courthouse. Obviously, they're expecting it to come down, and these guys are pretty well connected, and they know what's going on.
So we can safely say also, though, that this judge has been assiduously reading Blaze News, right?
Well, apparently so. The fact that he only criticized me for one of my statements that the FBI called into question on January 6th itself, but then he spent the rest of the time criticizing my journalism. And I think that's a pretty good indication that he must be reading what we're writing or watching our Blaze TV programs.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, but hello, Judge Cooper, if you're watching, please continue. We love having the audience. So what happens next? And, tell us about next steps and sentencing and your thoughts on timing of pardons and so forth and so on.
Judge Cooper reiterated today that I would still be for the next several months operating under my current pretrial restrictions. Now, unlike most January 6 defendants, like Stephen Horn, who was denied the right to come to D.C. today to cover my hearing from North Carolina, I don't have that restriction on me. I only have to notify my pretrial services officer of my intended travel. I have to let them know where I'm going and then when I'm coming back. That's it. I don't have any restrictions on my travel. That is unlike, as I said, any other January 6th defendant. I still don't have my right to carry a self-defense weapon at all. I have very few other restrictions on me, and so that will be maintained until my sentencing hearing, or if the sentencing hearing is then interdicted by a presidential pardon.
Well, that is definitely the route that we are going to be hoping and praying for you, Steve. I'm so glad that this is all going to be coming to an end, at least for you, in one way or another, very soon. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Jill, Matt, thank you. And I wore a tie for you today. I never do that.
You did. You look great, Steve. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
But Matthew, this is a story that we have been covering. And I mean, Steve has been a journalist here with us at Blaze News for quite some time now. And it's just interesting to have a front row seat to a trial that means so much for the freedom of speech and the freedom of press.
Yeah, look, I mean, Steve has given the country a front row to these issues and these trials by living what he's reporting. And it's a really remarkable case. If you're interested at all, you should go to blazemedia.com, go to theblaze.com and read his Why I Pled Guilty and What's Coming Next. He has a statement there. We have videos of him after he got out of the trial, and there's some articles about him. Our opinion editor, Ben Boychuk, wrote a great piece just asking the president directly, you got to pardon these people, these nonviolent offenders. So, I think that Steve is able to articulate what a lot of people have not been allowed to articulate and defend themselves in the public square. And he's going to continue to do that right up until the end, because, I have to tell you, in most of these cases, when there's not a violent offense, it's the same. They're punishing people for their speech, and they're punishing them for, these BS trumped up trespassing charges that they would never even think about when it comes to people who actually burnt buildings down. And one of the first things the president has to do to reestablish justice in this country is to give a pardon to people like Steve.
Yes, very well said. And you know what? When we come back, we're going to be having a discussion around a fight of a different issue, because the MAGA movement's future could be decided by the next Senate Majority Leader. And we'll give you all the latest on that next. Well, a lot of us have been holding our breath for the last several months, and we can finally exhale, and work can finally be done on major issues that this country is facing. And one of the most significant issues is our national debt. And the fact is, our nation is broke, and that debt is a house of cards that cannot quickly be dismantled. So the strategy remains the same. You still need to diversify your savings. We have so many things that are out of our control and out of our president's control, and it's important to have a safe haven for your savings. Birch Gold Group will help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA of physical gold. And the best news is it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. Text Jill to 989898 and get your free info kit. Plus, right now through Black Friday, you'll receive a free 1-ounce silver eagle for every $5,000 you purchase. So protect your savings with Birch Gold. Text Jill to 989898 and claim your eligibility for free silver today. Tomorrow, the Senate will hold a secret vote for the next Senate Majority Leader, and they're choosing between John Thune, John Cornyn, and Rick Scott. And it's a recent piece on Blaze News that argues that Senator Rick Scott is the best choice to turn Trump's mandate into reality. So here to discuss is Clint Brown. He's the president of American Path. So do you think that Rick Scott has a fighting chance? He might be the one that we would all prefer, but what are the odds that we would actually see Rick Scott coming into power here?
That's a great question, Joel. Nobody knows the whip count. Not even the candidates know the whip count. I've talked to surrogates and staffers for all of the candidates, and everybody thinks that they have 20 votes, something like that, which is mathematically impossible. So it's really interesting to see that they all sort of think they have it, because that means they're having conversations with members who are showing some interest but not committing. So it's anybody's guess who could get it. I do think Rick Scott stands a fighting chance. I think really all three candidates stand a fighting chance.
Clint, I just am so happy to have you on, someone who knows stuff about stuff in the midst of the swamp. It's great. Can you explain a little bit about why it's so hard? I mean, I think people are still struggling to understand why it's so hard to get the sort of Republican that, most of our audience feels represents them in this position. And you can see the frustration breaking out all over online now as people realize that it's very difficult to find a different sort of representative, a different sort of leader in the Senate for some reason.
Yeah, well, thanks, Matt. I try to know something about something. I would say it comes down to, this is an election about how the Senate operates, and it's all very personal. There are only 53 Republican senators. They all know each other. They have to work together every day. So that is one element, that it's personal, and it's about how the place operates on a personal level between members. Imagine your coworker is trying to get a position at work, and you all get to decide if he gets that position, and then you have to work together after. So that plays into it. The other thing is, the Republican conference isn't necessarily aligned with the MAGA mandate, with where the voters are right now. Some of them have been elected decades ago, and they are not up to speed with where the people are. So they take a different perspective on it. One thing I'll tell you is that just a few days before the election, Senator Mitch McConnell gave a quote to a reporter saying that he would probably spend more time fighting Republicans than Democrats after the election. And that gives you a sense of what some of the more establishment Republicans are thinking. I think he speaks for a number of them, and that's why they won't necessarily jump at the opportunity to vote for a MAGA America First candidate.
Well, Clint, you say that, and it makes me smile, because this afternoon, Mitch McConnell came out and he was taking credit for Republicans taking control of the Senate. He said, quote, "I was proud to help return a Republican majority to the Senate and thrilled to welcome some of the newest GOP senators to the Capitol." Now, he's famously out there like holding the purse strings, not allowing some of the money to go to candidates that he didn't like. I mean, is this Mitch just trying to take like one final victory lap here?
Oh, naturally, he's taking credit for all of it. It's pretty clear that Trump delivered this win. Republicans did not win in 22 when Trump wasn't on the ballot. And that's just hard evidence that it's not him. And of course, it's easy to take credit for the candidates that won. But to your point, Jill, they say, oh, those candidates who didn't win could have never won. Carrie Lake could have never won. That's why we didn't invest money in her. Rather than asking the question of what would happen if you had invested some of your massive amount of campaign money in Carrie Lake, would she have gone over the finish line? They never look at it from that perspective. They only look at it from the perspective of how can they take credit.
So, I mean, we're looking at the possibility that the Senate falls back into, let's call it McConnellism, shortly. Yes. I don't know how much, patience there's going to be for that, both at the White House and obviously among the American people. Do you have thoughts about the chances here and what might happen over the course of the next few years?
Oh, very much so. That gets into the heart of this battle. The battle is resolving the disagreements within the Republican Party, and the Senate is an institution designed to resolve disagreements. That is its purpose. So as we have this Republican infighting, we're going to see that be the biggest obstacle to accomplishing President Trump's agenda. It's going to be Republicans fighting them. And there's certain changes that can be made in the way the Senate operates to prevent that, such as having an amendment process. For the majority of his time in leadership, McConnell has blocked senators from offering amendments. How can you resolve disagreements about legislation if you can't put words on paper and vote on it? So that's what we're going to see. And what happens when you do that? If you can't vote on it in public on the Senate floor, it happens in a back room. Because how else do you get enough votes to pass the bill if you can't make little tweaks here and there to earn the support of your colleagues in the Senate? You do it in a back room. What happens in a back room? A few Republicans get together with a few Democrats. The bill includes a ton of Democrat priorities, maybe one or two MAGA priorities, and then they pass it, and we get a mostly Democrat government. So this is their plan for Democrats and the Uniparty to control the US government. Put it right in the Senate, let them take over the backroom negotiations, put in their priorities, and give a head pat to the America First agenda. That has to change. That's why they're having this battle right now about how the Senate operates. A number of senators, including Senator Mike Lee, Ron Johnson, Rick Scott, they've been great at articulating a vision for how the Senate should operate and a way to prevent that. And I was very pleased to see today, even Senator John Cornyn release a letter. Basically, it sounded like it was written by Mike Lee in a way. There were a lot of things in that letter that would have been very pleasing to conservatives. So what you might consider more center Republican, old school Republican, they're moving in the direction of the conservatives who want to see the America First agenda enacted in Congress.
Well, Clint, I want to transition over now to Trump's administration and his transition team. I want just the 50,000-foot view that you have seen from what has played out in this last week.
It seems like they're moving fast to get people in positions. It seems like they have a good plan of who they want where. And I've seen that there's still a lot of people deciding. There are a lot of people sort of lobbying, angling for their positions in the administration. But they're organized. That's the key. There is an organized level to it. I've been pleased to see Elon Musk down at Mar-a-Lago bringing some of his Department of Government Efficiency perspective to this conversation. And I know that the transition team has done a great job. You know, we haven't seen really a ton of leaks before this week, and some of those leaks may be strategic by different people who are either angling for a position, or maybe the Trump transition wants to float names out there to see how the base reacts to that. But it's incredible that we haven't seen those kind of leaks until this week. And I wouldn't even knock them for the leaks this week, because there may be a strategic reason for those leaks. So I've been very impressed with their efficiency. I've been impressed to see the people who are involved, and I'm rooting for them. I hope it works out well. It's going to really matter for the Senate. The Senate confirms all the personnel, and so they need to start engaging with the Senate on that. So as soon as they know who the next leader is, they can get into that process and move very quickly to start confirming Trump noms.
All right, Clint. So last 60 seconds we have with you. I have two questions. One of them is self-indulgent. One of them is not. I want to know who, if you have a person in particular that you would really like to see in charge of some part of the government. And number two, particularly Eric Prince. I've been wondering, because I haven't really heard his name around anything particular necessarily publicly, but it sure seems like he would fit in somewhere. I wonder if you have thoughts about him.
You know, actually, Matt, you read my mind. It's pretty impressive. So I think Eric Prince should certainly be a part of this administration. There's a place for him. He has a real world, strategic, tactical perspective on how to make America great on a world stage, how to get out of global conflicts without showing weakness. He's the person who can figure out from the strategic words on paper, policy paper, to actually putting boots on the ground. What do you do? So I'd love to see him involved, maybe at CIA, as the director of the CIA, something like that, Department of Defense. Really, he's going to be an asset wherever he goes. It would be absolutely wild to leave an asset like Eric Prince sitting on the sidelines. So I hope that they include him in some way in the next Trump administration.
There you go. Two birds, one stone, Peterson. Clint, thanks so much for joining us today with all your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
When we come back, we'll unpack the best way that Trump can defeat the deep state and deliver on conservative objectives up next. As the world teeters on the brink of annihilation, Dietrich Bonhoeffer is swept into the epicenter of a deadly plot to assassinate Hitler in Angel Studios' upcoming film, Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Assassin, and Spy. It's hitting theaters on November 22nd, and you can get showtimes right now at angel.com/Jill. And His faith and his fate are at stake, and Bonhoeffer must choose between upholding his moral convictions or risking it all to save millions of Jews from genocide. So will his shift from preaching peace to plotting murder alter the course of history or cost him everything? Now, I've already watched it. It's so good. I'm going to watch it again and buy tickets for my friends to go see it in theaters. And Angel Studios, they've done such a good job bringing this story to life and the production value of this movie. They also made Cabrini, which was excellent. And it's a must-see movie for the times in which we live. So find out this Thanksgiving. Get your tickets today at angel.com/Jill. Shortly after winning the 2024 election, Donald Trump posted a 10-point plan to rein in D.C. bureaucrats.
Here's my plan to dismantle the deep state and reclaim our democracy from Washington corruption once and for all, and corruption it is. First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively.
Well, he sounds just like our next guest. That's what Blaze TV host Daniel Horowitz also advocated for in a recent piece on theblaze.com. And he joins us now to discuss this. So, Daniel, I mean, I'm excited right now, right? We're still a week after the election. I mean, how many people is Donald Trump going to fire, and how many realistically can we actually kind of put on the table here?
Well, here's the fraction. So there's 2.2 million federal workers, and that doesn't include the military, obviously civilian. The swamp believes that you can only fire about 4,000, what they call the political appointees. So it's a tiny fraction. What they like to say is the civil service people below the political appointees can't be fired. These independent commissions, you know, like the Federal Trade Commission, FCC commissioners, they can't be fired. And that people that are tenured, so sometimes Congress will pass a law having a tenure for a director of an agency for, 8-10 years or something like that. Well, their term's not up. The reality is, and this is going to be a big test for the president, is to stare down anyone who says that they fall under one of those categories. One of them was Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, said, well, I'm tenured. My term's not up until 2026. You cannot legally fire me. It needs to be made very clear from the Constitution case law, if you are a part of the executive branch of government, you are subject to the president's firing authority. And if you're not, then you're not part of the executive branch. It's that simple. I'm a big Article 1 guy, the legislative authority. And Congress, if they want to get back at the president, they could say, well, if you fire a guy, I'm not going to reconfirm a new person. Although, now he has a Republican Senate, but theoretically they could do that. They could abolish an office. They could defund an office. They could defund the salary. But one thing that they cannot do, because that's within the plenary power of the executive, is to force upon a president a particular employee that he does not want. And I think it's important to lay down that marker. There's no such thing as an independent agency. It's got to be one of the three branches. So the Federal Reserve is not the judiciary, and it's not the legislature. So it's the executive branch, and Jerome Powell absolutely can be fired, and people similar to him can be fired.
Okay, but Daniel, now you're triggering the constitutional nerd in me. And I love the fact that we're about to talk about William Howard Taft and Myers in 1926, this wonderful Supreme Court case. I mean, here's the problem, and I have a question to ask after the problem. The problem is, of course, that in the last, 100 years, the assumption has increasingly been, and the courts have allowed this thing to grow, and it's a system in which we got to say very clearly, most presidents, right, would say, I can't fire all these people, and that's why they haven't. And to be fair, no Republican president has tamed this administrative state, right? And the assumption is that, no, you can't, because of civil service reform, because of the laws, because of what we put in there. You can't get rid of the vast majority of millions of federal workers. You can't just fire them. That would be to go back to the spoils system. What you're suggesting is that maybe we should take the Constitution seriously, and the president is actually given executive power, unlike Congress, which it lists out, right, very clearly that what powers it has. It cabins it. President is just given executive power, and it lists out some. So certainly you point out the Supreme Court has in the past said, no, the president has to be in charge. And so he can say, you're fired. But, you know, Trump the first time around didn't, as you point out, say, you're fired, all the people who should have been fired. Don't you think, though, that the reason was coming in there for the first time, he was just operating under the assumption that really all of D.C. does, Republican or Democrat?
Yeah, and look, you know, we've had several decades of really bad doctrines. We've seen the Chevron doctrine, deference to the administrative state, but these have fallen. I think one thing people need to forget, precisely because of Trump being able to overturn, Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat, Anthony Kennedy's seat, he's walking into a different situation legally than he was in his first term. Because right now you have a very different Supreme Court. Now, you know, look, I've been pretty critical of Kavanaugh and Barrett at times, and they're not going to be with us and everything. But this doctrine, they're all very strong on. In fact, Kavanaugh really auditioned for a Supreme Court in a CFPB case on the D.C. Appellate Court, making it very clear that the president can fire this, independent commissioner, director of CFPB, and indeed the Supreme Court a few years later wound up affirming that, and that was a landmark decision. So I'm actually very confident he would have the votes on the Supreme Court to get through this, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of these commissions. People need to remember, independent agency just means it's loosely hanging without a department head. It's independent of a department, but it's not independent of the president. It's within the executive branch of government. And then, the other end of the spectrum, the people lower than the political appointees, I mean, we haven't had a ruling on that yet, but based on what Kavanaugh and even Roberts have written, I think there's at least 5 votes to sustain it.
Well, you had another piece on the Blaze.com, and you were laying out key ways that conservatives can actually take action on major issues. I'm sure people are very excited to hear that, just the thought of conservatives out there and going through with the mandate, but also to avoid some of the complacency with the election win. So can you take us through some of those steps?
Sure. I think too often conservatives overpromise and underdeliver. So their promises are too general and almost like quixotic. In other words, we're going to cut 50% or cut trillions, and then not only do they cut nothing, they grow spending every time they're in power. So I think, this time we need to realize this. A lot of people are building, to give an analogy, building bullets and weaponry. And there's a lot of different transition shops and NGOs and conservative figures doing all sorts of things. But we need to remember there's about 3 or 4 trigger pulls that you have in the first year of the administration. It's the 10% that's going to dictate the success of the 90%. It's the budget bills, the debt ceiling, the reauthorization bill. So a lot of these programs come due, and the president can be like, all right, I'll let it expire if you don't enact my reforms. And then, of course, there's the budget reconciliation, which is the one mechanism they have to avoid the filibuster and pass transformational spending cuts with a simple majority. And that's where they really need to channel and realistically set goals. And I set out some of them, obviously full repeal of the Green New Deal, the president, and could do this even executively, impounding unspent funds, which there are many among a lot of the big ticket item bills that have been passed the last couple of years, things that are clearly achievable, that are in line with the president's vision. But again, strategically, they have to go beyond what they've done until now, which is tax cut, tax cut, tax cut. You got to move beyond that. I think we all agree that the tax cuts need to be extended, at least most of them. You could, tinker, do different things here and there, but fundamentally we want them extended. But all the more so, you got to have a plan for cutting spending. So simply drill, baby, drill, and tax cuts that's not where it's at now.
All right, I have a couple rapid fire questions for you, Daniel. Do you think Trump will fire Jerome Powell?
No.
Okay. Do you think that Rick Scott will become majority leader in the Senate?
No. I mean, the bottom line is that he doesn't have the votes. It's a private vote. It's an insular vote. It's a finite vote of 53 people. Look, I hate to be obnoxious here, Matt, but as you well know, I've been engaged in primaries for the life cycle of every one of the rhinos in the Senate.
This is your time to say it. This is your time to shine.
And look, I only say this to be forward-looking because a lot of these guys are in cycle right now. We've slept through these primaries, and unfortunately, sometimes we've allowed Trump to endorse some of these guys. So you reap what you sow. We just don't have the votes. Like, a lot of people are like, well, I want this guy, Scott. Thune's horrible. I hate to say it, but Thune and Cornyn are kind of reflective of the conference. So, I mean, I don't want them, but you have a roster like that because we're like, Daniel, I just want the R. I want the R. I want Sheehy in Montana. All right, well, that's nice. He won, but, he's going to be a certain way. Jim Justice in West Virginia, we just got him in. He's going to be a certain way. And, this time around, I will just say there's a lot of deep red state rhinos, both Senate and governor, that are in cycle. We really got to get working on that.
Okay, not a rapid fire answer, but we give you that because you deserve the chance to say it. One more. Do you have someone you're really excited about going into one of these cabinet positions that no one's talking about yet? Like, what do you propose? Give me one pick.
Sure. I mean, I wanted Larry Kudlow for Treasury Secretary because I think that would be the first non-swamp, sort of more Milton Friedman than Keynesian for a long time. What I'm hearing is not good. But I will say, Mike Huckabee for ambassador to Israel, that's special. I do think foreign policy is going to be night and day and immediate change.
Well, you know what? A little bit of hope there at the end from Daniel Horowitz, and we're going to take that. Thanks so much for joining us today.
See you later.
When we come back, our next guest will explain how the Trump campaign turned transgenderism into a winning issue. Just ahead. A week ago today, we saw the largest political comeback ever as Donald Trump made gains among minorities and suburban women voters. And this ad might be one reason why.
It's hard to believe, but it's true. Even the liberal media was shocked Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners and illegal aliens.
Every transgender inmate would have access.
Kamala's for they, them. President Trump is for you.
Exit polling suggests that the transgender issue could have been a determining factor in picking up votes for those two demographics specifically. So here to discuss is the man behind that ad, Terry Schilling. He's also the president of the American Principles Project and Claremont Institute Lincoln Fellow. So Terry, tell us about this ad. How did you make it? How did this come to be?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Jill. And it was so awesome spending election night with you.
Lots of high fives.
Lots of high fives and smiling and laughing. In all transparency, I didn't create that ad, but I created dozens of other ads around this transgender issue, and we have been working to convince candidates like Donald Trump to take this issue up on the campaign trail because of how powerful it is. My organization, American Principles Project, we have spent over $1 million focus grouping and message testing and polling this issue in particular, and we found all of the angles. And Jill, I'm telling you, this issue works with every demographic that people like President Trump needed to win over. Suburban women, works with them. Minorities, works with them. Young people, it works with them. Everyone that Trump needed to win on election day, he got them using these types of ads.
Terry, is it true to say that Republicans failed to really take up this issue, but Donald Trump did? Or is that an exaggeration?
No, Doc, that's exactly right. Listen, Donald Trump is the first president to win the popular vote since 2004. No Republican has ever won the popular vote since then. And what was the main theme in 2004? Traditional marriage, right? President George W. Bush won that election because of that. Donald Trump figured out what no one else could, which is that the culture wars, fighting against the Democrats' culture war that they've been waging, not just on adults now, but on our children, is a huge political winner. And Donald Trump should get all the credit in the world.
Well, when we look back then to the red wave that wasn't back in 2022, do you think some of the Republicans, when they failed to address these issues like the transgenderism head on, do you think that now had something to do when you look back at that versus a much more bold stance this time around?
Jill, that's exactly right. If we pulled the ad impact data. So ad impact tracks all of the spending and all the campaign ads and what the issue is that's mentioned in the ad. Republicans in 2024 spent over $250 million attacking Democrats on transgender issues. They spent almost no money in 2022 attacking Democrats, even on transgender sports, and definitely none in 2020. The issue was still too premature. But this was I believe one of the biggest changes in the electorate was the use of transgender issues against Democrats. Jill, it's not rocket science. People don't want their children to learn stupid things like men being able to have babies or putting men in girls' sports. They don't want this stuff. It's not that hard to understand.
Now, I know you at one point sat down with President Trump on this issue. Where do you think we go from here? I mean, now he's won. This issue is certainly part of it. You've been laying that out publicly. So what happens next?
There are two things that we need to do going forward, and this is the niche that APP is going to fill. We're going to be bulldogs for President Trump's pro-family agenda. We're going to make sure that he's able to get his 3 pledges done that he included in the RNC platform, defunding all of this woke DEI and transgender programming in schools, defunding sex change procedures for minors, and then also, obviously, fixing girls' sports. We have to deliver on our promises, Doc. Otherwise, voters aren't going to reward us. But secondly, and this is probably just as important, we need to continue to invest millions of dollars into campaigns and elections in 2025. There's a series of congressional races that are going to be special House races. We're going to have a 2-vote margin in the House. We can't lose those races, and these culture war issues are a key to winning those. So we're going to keep ramping up the political pressure on these guys, investing millions of dollars here on this issue, attacking Democrats, making them pay a political price. And then we're also going to be bulldogs for President Trump and his pro-family agenda.
Well, Donald Trump has said promises made, promises kept. He said he did it his first administration. He promises to do it again here. So in the week that it's been since Donald Trump has won, what has you the most fired up about what you've seen so far from what will be the next administration?
Well, he's making so many great choices. Elise Stefanik at the UN ambassador. There's so many more coming down the pike. But I think the thing that I found most promising is just how serious Trump is about reforming the Department of Education. He made several promises to unwind the Department of Education, and it sounds like from the transition team that he's going to hold through to that. So it's absolutely wonderful. We have to get rid of the Department of Education, and we're going to support President Trump in all of his efforts to do that and undo their power and their hold over the American. Only 1/3 of our kids can read at grade level. Did you know? I mean, that's so insane, and that's happened after the Department of Education was instituted in 1979. So we've got to get this job done here.
Terry, in the 60 seconds we have left, I have to say, we have to remind viewers, I mean, we're not tired of winning, right? And we're not tired of enjoying this honeymoon period. So give us your thoughts, because you were there with Jill on that night. Give us a few thoughts. What was that like? When was the big moment?
When they called Pennsylvania, that was when we all knew it was over, right? It was clear. We just needed one of those Rust Belt states to win, and we got it pretty early on in the night. Doc, I was just so shocked that we ended up having election results before the morning, yes. Right? So it's absolutely beautiful. But we've got it. Listen, this is going to play out very beautifully on this culture war stuff. You're already seeing Democrats starting to come out and try to moderate on it. And now they're going to have primary challengers. This is a huge wedge issue. We can really drive a stake right down the middle of the entire Democratic Party. It's beautiful. We just got to carry the job through.
Well, Terry, it was fun being there with you. It was fun winning, and it's fun even a week later. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, guys.
When we come back, we'll have some parting thoughts to wrap up the show. Don't go anywhere. Well, Well, it's been 1 week since Donald Trump was elected. And now we get to the fun part, Matthew Peterson. We are trying to figure out, we're playing the game as we have throughout the show today, of who is going to be in the administration. I thought it was interesting that Clint Brown also said Eric Prince was at the top of his list as well.
I think great minds think alike.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's obvious that this is a guy who has been sort of re-entered the political scene publicly when it came to the assassination attempt and other things, who's obviously insanely competent and has the kind of skills that are really needed in an area where it's really needed, our military and national defense.
And friend of the show, we would love to see it as well, just for our own reasons. But I thought it was also interesting. One of the points that Clint made was the fact that we don't hear a lot of leaks coming out right now. And we are right now just with the trying to figure out who they're going to place in the administration. But this was a hallmark of the first Trump administration. Oh, yeah. You had another day, another leak came out. It seems like they have gotten that under wraps this time around.
Yeah, this is really, really, really important. I mean, I can't emphasize this enough. This is why I'm just white pilling and happy, and we'll dispute and whatever, and the battle and the war is yet to come. But this is night and day from last time, because last time you really didn't even have a transition team. This time you've quietly had a disciplined private transition going on in an ordered way this entire time. And I'm almost to the point now where I think if there are leaks, they're probably on purpose to find out who the leakers are at this point. And that is remarkable. As Clint said, it's organized, and that's going to make all the difference in the world when it comes to success.
But Matthew, it's a weird place to be in as a conservative, to be excited about the group that the government is putting together. I don't know how to feel right now.
No, I keep on. So at first I kind of felt like the Charlie Brown in the football, like, oh no, Buffalo Bills are going to lose again. In the last moment, it's going to go wide right. But then it didn't. It went through the hoop. It went through it did it again. It did it again. And so you can be happy, and obviously want to hold the administration accountable and hold Trump accountable to continue on its promises. But so far, it just really is remarkable to see intelligent thought, back and forth, an incredible leadership job by Trump to put this together, and there's thoughtfulness going into it. And you have to understand too, it's easy to sit at home and say, oh, I like so and so and so and so, but this is a complicated job. It's like putting together a startup, or like management in a large corporation. You have to think about who the different pieces are and what do you have. You might have this person's really good over here that'll make up for some deficiencies in this person over here, right? But they could be really good at this. And this is complicated because you don't necessarily know when you watch these people on TV whether they're good at, management. Are they good at management? Are they good? Are they creative? Are they good at ideas? Do they have a vision? They have different talents and skills, and putting that together requires a lot of thought and is exceptionally important, but they're giving it that thought. And it's organized.
They are. And one of those people giving thoughts is Elon Musk. He's basically now a member of the Trump family out there.
I mean, I love seeing the libs have a problem with it. Yeah. I mean, Obama was just hanging out with all of Google. I mean, This is common, right? And who would you rather have if you're going to have the moneyed class involved, which they always are, than Elon Musk, who's actually world-class startup and management king, balancing 6 major businesses on his finger.
And he is going to do what he did to Twitter, to the federal government, and just slash it all into a million little pieces. And we will be the most excited that we've ever been. Again, it's a very strange place to be. But don't forget to subscribe to Blaze News Tonight on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll be back tomorrow night to break it all down.